Now, here's what I want to show you. So Nancy Mace is so awful that they decided to give her a small little room and just let her lay into people. So they gave her an oversight hearing on $10 million in taxpayer-funded transgender animal tests. Transgender lab rats and poison puppies, oversight of taxpayer-funded animal cruelty, where she exposes over $10 million of taxpayer money used on animal experiments involving transgender mice, rats, monkeys. Watch the ethical questions and wasteful spending highlighted by experts like Justin Goodman from the White Coat Waste Project. Again, same assholes. And they challenge the necessity and morality of these experiments.
The Subcommittee on Cybersecurity, Information Technology, and Government Innovation will now come to order.
Right. And to that end, she is questioning $10 million in biological experiments.
And welcome. Good afternoon. Without objection, the chair may declare a recess at any time. I recognize myself for the purpose of making an opening statement.
That's weird. That's what I also do. Like there's a little mirror right over here, and I'm like, hey, you, I almost didn't recognize you without it looks good. It's looking all right. It's coming together.
Good afternoon.
I can't tell if you look like a Viking or a pirate or a extra in a Ren Fair rom-com.
Last year, the White Coat Waste Project exposed more than $10 million in taxpayer funds that were spent creating transgender mice, rats, and monkeys.
Okay, $10 million, transgender, and it worked? Sorry, there are transgender monkeys running around? Oh my God, the version of 28 Days Later meets RuPaul's Drag Race is going to be hot.
These DEI grants funded painful and deadly
DEI? I guess because they're checking to see if it's possible for transition to work?
transgender experiments that force lab animals to undergo invasive surgeries and hormone therapies at universities across the country.
Okay, so $10 million spread out over university grants for a myriad of things. And what the university, like, we don't put a leash on what they could do. So some of them looked into these because that was part of the study. By the way, don't get riled up. It's fucking so lazy.
For example, the Biden-Harris administration spent $2.5 million taxpayer dollars, $2.5 million taxpayer dollars to study the fertility of transgender mice.
Maybe to see if puberty blockers do make animals sterile and therefore see if they're actually safe for kids. As opposed to, I don't know. Look, I understand Nancy Mace would rather this testing happen on living children, especially poor kids.
Let that sink in.
Against their will.
We spent over $2 million studying the fertility of transgender mice.
Also, no, there are no transgender mice. There aren't. What they did was they gave them puberty blockers, and then they took them off puberty blockers, and then they saw if they could still reproduce. That's not money spent on transgender mice. This is just dumb. My studies are self-reported.
$1.1 million was spent to find out if female rats receiving testosterone therapies to mimic transgender men were more likely to overdose on a party drug, commonly used in the LGBTQ community to induce drug-fueled what's called, quote, chemsex. I asked my staff what was chemsex and the chemical.
And they were like, I don't have Matt Gates's number. Does anybody have Matt Gates's number? I mean, basically just read any of the stories about him and the girls he doped.
And I guess it's something called GHB, which is a date rape drug, and also a drug that's used recreationally. So we spent over $1 million.
Yeah, it's about impulse control if you give testosterone to female mice to see if, because men have weaker impulse control technically than women do, largely because of the estrogen testosterone balance. And if you change that balance, does it make them able to fight their urges or manage their urges, or does it have a secondary negative effect? Now, again, apparently she wants this tested on people.
To find out if female rats receiving testosterone therapy were more likely to overdose on a date rape drug. Like, that's what your taxpayer dollars were being spent on.
No, they weren't. No, your taxpayer dollars were spent on universities within the freedom available to them to explore areas that were important to the current conversation or biological thinking, and see if things are possible, new pathogens and all kinds of stuff. And part of this was the question that came up repeatedly was, if you give somebody puberty blockers and you take them off it, will they be sterile? Which was one of the arguments she was making. And her big fear is that you'll find out or you won't, whatever it is. Like, she just doesn't want you to look.
Federal funds were also used to forcibly transition male monkeys to see if hormone therapy made...
Sorry, all animals were forcibly transitioned because they have no way of communicating, even if it did exist, that they wanted to be, you weirdo.
...them more susceptible to HIV. Now, I didn't know this until recently, but monkeys cannot be infected with HIV.
Huh. You don't think maybe, work with me on this, that it might be the H part in the IV? Because it's not PIV, primate immunodeficiency virus. It's HIV, human immunodeficiency virus. Stupid. It surprised me that rattlesnakes can't get the common cold. And it's if they do, it's very uncommon. So technically they can't get the common cold. They can get a cold, but it's very uncommon. And we spent money trying to see if you could hear a snake sneeze.
Yet this federally funded experiment forced them to take hormone-altering drugs to study a virus they cannot have. The Biden-Harris administration was so eager to propagate their radical gender ideology across all facets of American society that...
by the way, does anybody think this is like put into the record? Right? Can we see these, like, because again, grants to schools dealing with fertility or all kinds of things, like there's a myriad of areas where funding can go to. She's just gonna just say this, and we're just gonna take. I guess, you know what? They'll probably. How am I to guess? How am I to doubt what they're saying? Who am I to doubt? They clearly will give evidence later.
They were surgically mutating animal genitals. Like, taxpayer money went to that. So my question is, were they castrating mice, castrating monkeys? Were they getting double mastectomies?
Mastectomies?
The language that they used in many of these experiments were, quote, gender-affirming care, which I learned about 3 years ago what that meant. I thought that was maybe just some hormones or something something like that, but apparently gender-affirming care is actually surgical mutilation of genitals, and apparently it's not just humans.
Okay, again, experimenting on animals to see if the addition of testosterone or estrogen and imbalancing a biological male or a biological female would cause a bunch of negative effects, and again, fuck me. Like, we understand what this is. Like, what she's doing here is like an appeal to ick. It's supposed to just creep you out. Like, her constituents and the people around her going, ew, instead of going, all right, I can see why they would do that with animals rather than humans.
We're doing it too. We were doing it with taxpayer dollars to animals. It's well known that because of the differences between animal and human biology, animal testing frequently does not produce results relevant for humans. In fact,
right. But they start there.
90% of novel drugs that are successful in animal tests fail in human clinical trials.
Yeah, and 10% don't. What's the failure rate without it? Hey, asshole. Me, back here in the back, real quick. I got a question for you. How many untested drugs that we give to people are successful? What's the percentage of untested drugs that make it to human trials that work without animal testing, without any other testing? Like, what's the percentage? You don't have that written on the paper there? Jesus.
Today's scientific questions are so complex that we have well surpassed a time where it is useful or appropriate to rely on inhumane animal experiments to answer them. Recently developed technological tools can more accurately model human biology and identify solutions that are more useful for human patients.
Yeah, only if you have data around it, like kidney disease and shit like that, because we have lots of it. Stupid. It's the novel nature of these things that's icking you out, but it's also the novel aspect of these things that requires new data. There is no history of data around these things, dummy. That's why animal testing is part of the process.
But it is
Yeah, and by the way, thank you, Templeton. Like she's a fucking, like she gives a fuck about animal, the morality of animal testing.
It's often the federal bureaucracy that prevents these new technologies from being used. Instead of adequately investing in these innovative alternatives, the federal government has continued to funnel taxpayer dollars towards cruel animal experiments.
Or in a lot of these areas, there is no replacement for them yet. We have all this information on how a combustion engine works. Why can't we just apply that to an electric engine? Why don't we use just the same maintenance schedule on an electric engine that we use for a internal combustion engine? We have all this data. Why can't we just use all the data on gasoline and apply that to lithium-ion batteries? Gee, I don't know. I'd have to think about it, stupid.
Today, most of the 27 NIH institutes and centers conduct or support animal testing, as does the Food and Drug Administration, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the Department of Veterans Affairs, the Department of Defense, and countless other agencies.
Right, and Donald Trump is not going to stop any of it. What's your point?
We have some beagle puppies here with us today. Beagle puppies have gone through some of the worst medical experiments. I mean,
No, they haven't. They've gone through terrible ones, but they're considered the worst because you like beagle puppies.
drugging them with cocaine, having insects eat at them and their bodies so much until they die, drugging them until they die. These are God's creatures and they're beautiful, and you can see them sitting in the front row today. So we thank the folks who are here.
The issue, I think, might just be that, ma'am, if I may, it might just be that you didn't give a fuck about beagle puppies until you got a shot at trans people. Also, real quick, sorry. Hold on one second. Let's try to. There is a. Give me 1 second. There we go. No, this is the Beagle Brigade Act signed into law, boosting efforts to keep out bad food, whatever. Hold on. Beagle Biden Beagle rules testing. Let me do this. There we go. Yeah, this is this goes back to this is you got a center came plots passive. Okay, there we go. Yeah, where is it? Damn it! Yeah. U.S. Senator Tim Kaine, Democrat of Virginia, applauded the unanimous Senate passage of bipartisan FDA Modernization Act 2.0, which would end an outdated Food and Drug Administration mandate that experimental drugs must be tested on animals before they are used on humans in clinical trials. Kaine voted to pass the bill out of the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee over the summer. He's a composer of similar legislation, the FDA Modernization Act, led by Senators Rand Paul and Cory Booker. Look at that. People working together. I'm glad the Senate passes legislation that would prevent the suffering of innocent animals while still ensuring that critical medicines are safe and effective. Data has shown that animal testing is not always the best indicator of a drug's effects in humans, and we have alternative testing methods that are equally or more effective. I urge the House of Representatives to pass it soon and get it on President Biden's desk. Let's see if I hold on. There you go. Let's see. 2024, VA ordered to end experiments on dogs, cats, and primates by 2026. That's in Stars and Stripes. Look at that little papa. Experiments testing on cats, dogs, and primates by the Department of Veterans Affairs must end by 2026 under newly enacted legislation that lawmakers highlighted during a House subcommittee hearing on Tuesday. Debbie Wasserman Schultz of Florida led it up. Legislation was part of the VA spending bill, signed into law. What's your fucking point, lady? They shut it down. Republicans didn't give a shit. She only cares because she associates it with trans experimentation. She's trying to tie the two together.
And brought these beautiful beagle puppies here today. In fact, the U.S. government spends in excess of $20 billion a year conducting experiments on animals. The White Coat Waste Project found in 2021 that the NIH, the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, a component of NIH at the time, ran by Dr. Fauci, spent $1.68 million force-feeding toxic drugs to beagle puppies between 6 and 8 months old.
This has been around for a long time. This is the idea that they've been dragging this Fauci shit around. Let's see, Beaglegate they called it. What's the real story between animals are federally funded based on these reports and subsequent media coverage of dubbed Beaglegate. 24 House members led by Republican Nancy Mace of South Carolina sent a bipartisan letter to Fauci and the NIAID, which is part of NIH, asking for more information. The lawmakers request response by November 19. The studies were in Tunisia. White Coat Waste Project said its investigators had discovered, here you go. In its August post, the White Coat Waste Project said its investigators had discovered photos and government records showing that the NIAID ordered over $375,000 in funding for a study in Tunisia to drug beagles and lock their heads in mesh cages filled with hundreds of infected sandflies. This is what she's talking about. However, both the NIAID and the journal that published a paper on the study have since said the NIH did not fund that research. That's right. These taxpayer-funded white coats intentionally had the insects eat these beagles alive, the Post said, adding the beagles were also locked, quote, in cages in the desert overnight for 9 consecutive nights to use them as bait to attract infectious sandflies. The photos, which have been shared widely online, were pulled from a paper about a study that investigated whether the flies were more attracted to dogs with or without leishmaniasis, a parasitic disease found in the tropics, subtropics, and southern Europe. The paper, published last September, originally said the authors received funding for the research from the Wellcome Trust Foundation and the National Institutes of Health, but NIAID said it did not fund the study in question. The images of beagles were drawn from a manuscript published in 2021 in the journal PLOS, Neglected Tropical Diseases. The manuscript mistakenly cited support from NIAID when in fact NIAID did not support the specific research shown in the images of the beagles being circulated. NIAID said in a statement, a spokesperson emailed to us. Indeed, on October 26th, the journal issued a correction saying the U.S. National Institutes of Health and the Wellcome Trust did not provide any funding for this research, and any such claim was made in error. So they fixed it afterwards, the white coat crowd. In the NIAID-supported study, 12 dogs were immunized with an experimental vaccine. This is, however, they said it funded a separate project in Tunisia that studied a vaccine to prevent leishmaniasis. An experimental vaccine by the Pasteur Institute of Tunis, and then let out in a closed open space during the day during high sandfly season, according to hyper-endemic for canine leishmaniasis. The goal of the research was to determine if the experimental vaccine prevented the dogs from becoming infected in a natural setting. They were not caged. They didn't have their head put in a fucking like mesh wire cage. And she knows this.
Before dissecting and killing them. The conversation we're having today is important.
Because, okay, sorry.
2022, due to public criticism lobbied against Fauci's NIAID by me and other members of Congress, another $1.8 million experiment to abuse beagle puppies in various drug tests was canceled. So I want to thank the work of White Coat Waste and everyone in the room today, others who've been on the forefront of this fight to end this sick and cruel and barbaric testing of animals.
Okay, so we've seen in a couple things that she's been on this for a while. Now, whether she's on it because she hates Fauci and she's anti-science is immaterial. I'm against animal testing. I'm against certainly testing on fucking beagle puppies, but I don't think an animal is more valuable just because it's adorable. You know what I mean? There are a couple of animals like alligators where I'm like, all right, asshole. But no, but if you could test on them, I'd be like, I don't know what to tell you, you guys. You'd fuck me up if you had the chance. She's just doing this to drag on Fauci and to drag on transgender research. That's all she cares about. But the end result, if she is part of what stops it, I don't care. Right? She's not going to stop like transgender people from living their best lives no matter how hard she tries, and it's not going to happen based on this. So who gives a shit? Good for you. Go ahead, lady. End animal testing that's already ended.
Today. Thanks to one of our witnesses, Justin Goodman of White Coat Waste. We have in the audience, I already know, the beagles are here. The beagles are a reminder of the real cost of animal experimentation. So I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, they started out as cats. These are trans beagles.
This afternoon regarding wasteful government.
Yeah, they originally, these were, one was originally named Marmaduke. He was actually a Great Dane, and they transitioned him through a bonsai tree technique.
Spending on animal cruelty, and I also want to say, before I yield over to the ranking member for her opening statement, that this
is a nonpartisan issue, and that's why I voted for Kristi Noem, dog shooter.
This is a nonpartisan issue. Ironically, on oversight, while we might fight a lot in public, we are actually very nonpartisan here, and some of the most nonpartisan work in Congress comes right through this committee. So I want to thank the ranking member. Look forward to working with you. Thank you all for being here today. I will now recognize myself for 5 minutes.
Okay, this is her opening
questioning. Mr. Goodman, in your written statement, you state the White Coat Waste Project identified at least $10 million in NIH grants for transgender animal experiments. You state that 95% of the funding came from Dr. Fauci's NIAID.
Because he was running the NIH and the NIAID is underneath it. That's not like his personal directive. Simmer.
Why is the federal government spending taxpayer dollars to create transgender animals?
A great question.
Your microphone.
Thank you.
I know if you want, I could explain it again, or are you just going to be an asshole and say there is no reason?
Great question. I wonder why they're making cats constipated also. It's a question that rings around in my head at night.
Because you can't wait until they're constipated to test stuff on their gastrointestinal tract. You can't, hey, that one looks like it. Stick a thermometer up his ass.
Going to bed why we're funding these things. A lot of the programs that are funded do latch on to some type of social trend, and then animal experimenters use it as a money grab, as an excuse to get NIH tax funds from some, in this case, DEI grant. So the argument from this asshole is that there are future serial killers who like torturing animals, and they just like comb through social media for some like hot button issue, and then they go get money from what other side is for it or against it to run tests on animals just so they can make them, like they can put them through, they can torture animals, they can torture puppies. That's yeah, totally tracks. Grants were used to fund a lot of this stuff. So people who abuse animals find some kind of excuse to bring in new money, and they'll switch their research program over to something that's trendy to bring tax dollars into their university. That's
the University of Puppy Kickers.
Part of the big problem here is that colleges and universities.
See, scrotum tends to be more fluffy, and the male hamster scrotum is more. That's disgusting.
Universities are taking 25 to 40% off the top of every single one of these grants for indirect costs that go into a slush fund that has nothing to do with the research. So
Nothing to do with the research. What else does a university do besides research? I don't know. Pay for the facility? Janitorial services? Are you sure? So your problem is the money that comes in for experimentation that doesn't go to harming puppies. Awesome.
They're willing to let experimenters do whatever they want to animals to keep the money flowing in.
Some people might describe that as money laundering.
Let me show you money laundering. Let me tell you, there are few stories more shocking than the story of Vietnamese weasel coffee. You want to talk about money laundering? You have not lived until you have drank a cup of coffee that has been passed through the colon of a weasel. According to research by Professor Massimo Marcone at the University of Guelph in Canada, fucking Canadians, what they won't spend their money on, oh boy. During the weasel's digestive process, enzymes pass through the bean's pectin layer, changing their protein and molecular structure, creating sugars and mellowing the flavor. Mellow. Assy. Yeah. You guys, please tell me you guys know about this. It looks promising. I can't not unsee it though. All right, whose weasel shit in my milk? Yeah, that's the Kuchan for the people and the civets. A mixture of animal abuse and high price tag doesn't exactly make for the world's most appealing drink. Not to worry, if you had a cup of weasel coffee in Hanoi coffee shop or bought a bag to send home, the chances are good you haven't contributed to these practices. You buy a cup of weasel coffee in Hanoi for as little as this. One reason behind this low price is because the weasel coffee had never been near a civet at all. That doesn't mean you weren't giving close. So they recreate it, but this is ass. This is weasel ass coffee. Those are the beans. That's how they come out, and then yeah, there you go. I don't know why they would check it, but maybe it's in Canada. Maybe it's maybe there's a conjoined. I don't even know how to word this without grossing myself out. Maybe there's just the University of Ottawa and Civet University in Vietnam making ass coffee. Who knows?
All right, are sex change experiments that forcibly transition mice, rats, and monkeys necessary for science?
Are you a scientist? I think would be the first question. Are you a scientist? Do you actually? His answer is right there.
Absolutely not.
Why do these experiments at all?
Sorry, hold on. Based on what? Absolutely not. Why am I taking your word for it? You very well may be right. You may be right after they did the experiments, right? That's how you find out. We did the experiments. We found out, nope, it doesn't change a fucking thing. Yeah, lesson learned. So it did work, even if you found out it didn't do what you thought it would. Again, I didn't fail 1,000 times. I just found 999 ways not to make a light bulb and shove it up a civet's ass.
If they aren't producing useful human relevant research, why again, you think it's a money issue? Follow the money.
Animal testing is big business.
And apparently they like it. It's not just, it's a pleasurable business, apparently. There's apparently universities all over the United States where they love getting bucks from the NIH to just stick a cattle prod up a monkey's ass for some reason.
I've been long vocal about animal experiments and federal funded animal testing, and worked with you to prevent Fauci's plan to waste almost $2 million in taxpayer dollars to maim and murder beagle puppies, for example.
Which we now know was false.
Why was Dr. Fauci so insistent on poisoning these puppies, even though, as you state in your written statement, the FDA does not mandate that human drugs be studied on dogs?
Because they didn't?
So much of the problem with all of this is institutional inertia. It's that people just continue doing the same thing because that's what they've done before.
Yeah, that explains all the leeching treatments I've gotten.
There was a report that came out the National Academy of Sciences put out a few years ago about the VA's testing on dogs that Congressman Khanna actually helped us get the NAS to conduct. And they found that most of the VA's testing on dogs was unnecessary. And not only that it was unnecessary, but one of the reasons why is that there's this circular reasoning that they use to defend it when they propose a new project. They say, well, we used dogs previously, so we're just going to use dogs again.
Because the information they got before actually worked out. I mean, it's terrible, but like they're not just doing it out of habit. If it didn't work, it wouldn't work again.
And there's no one to break that cycle. There's not enough oversight to say, hey, maybe we don't need to do this anymore.
Yes, there was. It ended a year ago after a 2023 introduction of that bill by Democrats under Joe Biden. Simmer the fuck down.
Maybe there's a better way to do it.
There's definitely a better way to do it now. But don't pretend that because you live in fucking 2025 and AI and computers have made these giant leaps forward that everybody who was doing this shit in the 90s was just doing it because they like to burn puppies' feet, you fucking weirdo.
It's like, if you only have a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
I'm sorry I used that phrase. I'm going to stop.
And that's kind of the problem.
Right.
No, apparently everything. If you're a hammer, everything looks like a beagle's nose.
And what would have happened to these beagle puppies if if your organization hadn't rescued them?
In the case of those experiments, those dogs were going to be force-fed and injected with massive doses of experimental drugs to poison them to see at what point they got sick or died.
Yeah, where'd you rescue them from?
And those tests will have no relevance for the safety and efficacy of that drug in human beings.
Thank you. Dr. Locke, if you...
Well, but no. Where'd you get them? I mean, did you pick them up at a government facility? Was it University of fucking Cambridge? Was it UCLA? Where? Wouldn't that matter? Because if you went and fucking rescued them in Tunisia, I got to kind of call bullshit.
Questions for you. Can the scientific challenges we face today be solved by relying on animal testing?
Relying? No, you can't rely on any kind of limited testing. Can you rely on human testing alone right out of the gate? No, because you'll end up killing a bunch of people. You'll never get to a drug that you can actually release.
No, not all of them.
Oh, not all of them. There's some wiggle room.
Can you briefly describe how new technologies can allow us to transition away from animal testing without hindering scientific research?
Certainly. I also want to point out that in my written testimony, I do try to lay out a roadmap for how that could happen. But basically, what we need to do is we need to spend a lot more resources supporting these non-animal technologies, such as organs on a chip and organoids, so we can use them.
Human-animal hybrids. Okay, look at this. Look at this. We're all coming together. Human-animal hybrids, creating human cells and mixing them with pig cells and seeing if because they can grow faster as pig cells, and then you grow this thing and then you see if it's treated and what the response is to the drug, is exactly what science has been leaning towards away from this. It's the same fucking guy. Why did all these guys go bald? They're either all going to the same orgies or they met at Greco-Roman wrestling class. Probably not. But the point is, in this situation, this is the shit that during the Bush administration, Alex Jones was telling the Nancy Maces of the world that this is how they're going to make, chimeras. Yes, it's a solution. Everybody's been for it for a long fucking time. And it does beat animal testing. Duh.
Those to study many of the phenomena that we're now studying in animals.
Right. And the only people hamstringing the organoid growth and the chimera experiments to see what works in human tissue and what doesn't has been Republicans.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Baker, What are your thoughts today, reading your testimony for the opportunity to testify, that it's long overdue? Where do we go from here? How do we fix the problem?
I think we've
Now that all of the children are growing up.
fixed the problem by investing in what is going right. We've got to cut a lot of this terrible animal research. We need to cut the National Primate Research Centers. We are funding these centers to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars every year. We've got to stop funding animal.
One moment, please. This is what she's talking about. National Primate Research Centers. The top 10 accomplishments. There you go. Who we are, what we do. We're a network of 7 biomedical and behavioral research centers that know curiosity and creativity make breakthroughs possible. We partner with the National Institute of Health and others to develop solutions for health issues by studying non-human primates. These highly regulated studies provide unique insights available to, okay, this is their story on this. COVID-19 vaccine shows promise, blah, blah, blah. Promising tuberculosis therapy, safe for patients with HIV, it finds. Human trials for Parkinson's begin after primate success. Breakthrough in HIV treatment. Tulane study shows promising clearing. Unlocking the new avenues of COVID-19. This is why they hate it, because it's primarily around HIV and COVID and infectious diseases and flu shit and all that kind of stuff. Now, education learners, new primate info, research, NIH, active open data portal, education learners, Americans for Medical Progress, AMP, love, care, and progress inside the non-human research facility. You're leaving there? Okay, cancel, whatever. Policymakers, media, National Association for Biomedical Research, Primate Research. Okay, stay connected. Here's their whole thing. Mission and vision, the 7 centers. Okay, where are the 7 centers? They're in California, Oregon, Washington, Texas, Louisiana, Georgia, and Wisconsin. 7 centers, 1 network. Multicultural pals. Inukchuk. All right, shall we look at Texas real quick? This is just Southwest. I don't know why that. Okay, continue. Come on, Texas. Let's do this. Texas Biomedical Research Institute. So the funding, there you go. Improving the health of our global community through innovative biomedical research with non-human primates. This is the whole thing. Extraordinary research. Our science, animals and research, education, laboratory core services, blah, 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 blah. In San Antonio, there's its address. It's a shipping address and its mailing address. Texas Biomedical Research, health starts with science, copyright 2025. So they keep updating it. Learn more about us. Southwest Primate Center is part of a network of national primate research centers funded by the National Institute of Health, Office of Research Infrastructure Programs. SPR-NRC is a unit of Texas Biomedical Research Institute. Texas Biomed, a not-for-profit independent research institute with a strong history of pioneering philosophy, committed to beating monkeys until they're sad. Download this brochure for more information about it. The leadership. Here they are. Let's see the puppy kickers. There she is. There's Karina Ross. She's the head puppy kicker. She's the monkey flogger. Catherine Shelton, DVM, PhD, DACLAM, Associate Director of Veterinary Resources, attending veterinarian. There she is. This lady, Dr. Shannon Hall Ursone, she's the third in charge. Mahesh Mohan is one of only 2 dudes. Yeah, only 2 guys there. And Dr. Angelica M. Olmo Fontanes is the Assistant Director of Research, so she's in charge of mistreating the monkeys. Assistant Director of Operations, so she operates on the monkeys. And he's the Finance Director, and he's the Interim Associate Director of Research. So whoever the last guy was or person was bailed. So it's congratulations, lady. You are 5-2 in the leadership of monkey beaters.
Animal experiments outside the United States, as Mr. Goodman said, that have no oversight. We've got to stop. If you can meet your objectives without using animals, there's absolutely no reason that you should. And
totally agree.
so
And I was going to say, thank you for bringing that up, the amount of money, the hundreds of millions. I recently found out in the state of South Carolina, in my district, there's a primate breeding center and testing site, Alpha Genesis. They've made, to my understanding, over $100 million from NIH over the last 20 or so years. This is a boondoggle. It is.
No, it isn't. They actually use them. You can be against the using of them, which I am, but it's not a boondoggle. It's not a racket. It's a thing. And also, it's your fucking state. So, I don't know, fix it, shut it down, pass a law on the state level. What's wrong with you? And what was the other thing? $20 million? Oh, the fact that it's called Alpha Genesis sounds like something out of fucking Planet of the Apes. Right? It sounds like in a Netflix series, the name of the awful company where the infected monkeys escaped
and
from.
Testing site, Alpha Genesis. They've made
Alpha Genesis. You know, I think she's just mad because Genesis, Bible, primates, evolution, that makes her mad.
to my understanding, over $100 million from NIH over the last 20 or so years. This is a boondoggle. It is a racket, and hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah, it doesn't cost more than like $5 to take care of a full-grown monkey. I mean, all you need is a good yard fence and a bucket of monkey chow, right? What is all this money going to?
Billions of dollars, in fact, have been wasted on it. So I want to thank you all for your testimony today. Thank you for being here. I would now like to recognize my colleague, Ms. Brown, for 5 minutes.
Again, thank you to our witness.
Question, Mr. Goodman.
By the way, this is all her stuff. This is on her channel, so she cut out everybody else. This is just her.
What is the worst animal testing experiment you've ever heard of and uncovered?
And I'm dreaming about it right now.
There's some really bad ones out there. What is the absolute worst one you've ever heard of and uncovered?
And was Anthony Fauci there masturbating behind a glass pane, like a one-way mirror at the time? I bet he was.
The kitten cannibalism was pretty horrendous. Breeding kittens just to force them to eat cat meat and then killing them even though they were perfectly healthy after they collected their feces out of a litter box. I mean, that's literally what was happening. They were doing that to thousands and thousands of kittens. The DOJ, until recently, was stabbing, shooting, and blowing up live animals for training exercises. We were able to cut that and defund that.
Under Joe Biden.
The experiments that the NIH funded and Fauci funded in Tunisia, where they were putting the dogs and heads in mesh cages and filling them with biting flies.
That was a lie. I pointed that out earlier.
Yeah, there's a lot of nightmarish stuff that we're being forced to fund, and taxpayers don't like it, and they don't even know how bad the situation is. If they did, they would be, marching in the streets.
Yeah.
They are marching in the streets, but largely because Elon Musk is getting their Social Security numbers.
And Dr. Locke, a question for you. What are the prospects of a drug therapy that fails animal testing? Is it likely to receive regulatory approval?
Thank you for your question. I'm not an expert on the drug development process, but the way
Excellent. Glad we asked you. Thanks. Next.
you've described things, I think if the drug would not make it through the tests that are required, it would not be able to be in the market.
So what you're saying is if you gave it to an animal and the animal died, you're less likely to give it to a person? What are the odds?
If I could just add, though, that Congress has really looked closely at this issue about developing drugs and has
Under Democrats.
passed a law, the FDA Modernization Act, that removed the requirements for testing drugs. And
Under Joe Biden.
my understanding is that there's bipartisan support for another law because Congress feels that the FDA is not moving more quickly in this area. That is the FDA Modernization Act 3.0 that would force the agency to really pay a lot more attention to using alternatives.
Okay, and then Ms. Baker, before I hand it over to Ms. Boebert, I love your idea
Oh, dear God. Boebert was in this one?
of revisiting the Animal Welfare Act. I would be open to working with you and finding that language and doing a bill that would insert that language to define.
Great. Nancy Mace, trying to, cares more about animals than we give her credit for. Awesome. Good for you. How about this? How about leave trans people alone, keep your fucking nose out of their business, and just focus on this? Do you realize how awesome you could be simply by doing that? Just leave people alone. If this was all you were doing, fuck, for the most part, listening to this, I would think you were a Democrat. The only reason she's having to hold this hearing and do this at all is because Republicans were hamstringing the previous FDA modernization acts.
What an animal is. I think it's very important. I'm all about small parts, big difference. Of course, I would like
Oh, so you've met Trump.
to eradicate animal testing altogether, but that seems like an easy win that we could work on together in a nonpartisan manner. So I would love to talk.
I agree. Hurrah. Hurrah. Busy yourself with this. Awesome. Great. Yes, do that. Spend all your fucking time doing this and leave trans people alone. You don't know shit. And even if you think you're helping, you're not. I think, chat room, wouldn't you be completely okay with that dipshit just working on this all the time? If that was her fucking one nerve she worked all the time and then she was just trying to do shit for jobs in her district? It'd be fucking great. Do that. And leave trans people alone. Oi, her hair looks like something about Mary. There is something chunky in there. I mean, I washed mine this morning and it's very flowing. I gotta say, it got very fluffy. Cause I think, you know what it was? I didn't put it in a towel. I usually put my hair up in a towel and it flattens out the front and kind of twists it a little bit. And I just let it hang. And then I was late running around and then it just fucking straight up metal. Boom. So, again, progress.